The realm of defense contracts, where international law and military strategy intersect, is a very complicated and convoluted subject matter. It's a world where agreements between nations and defense contractors shape the landscape of global security. A breach of these contracts can trigger a cascade of consequences impacting diplomatic relations, economic stability, and even military capabilities. Now, what exactly is the multi-faced world of defense contracts? How would we go about tracing their historical evolution, to examining their contemporary significance, and exploring the potential repercussions of their violations? By understanding the complexities and nuances of these agreements, we gain valuable insights into the delicate balance between national security, international cooperation, and the rule of law. To dive further into the subject matter, I sat down with Ricardo Harris, a deputy director at TACOM, TACOM being a major subordinate command of Army Material Command. TACOM manages the Army's ground equipment supply chain, which constitutes about 60% of the Army's total equipment.
My name is Ricardo Harris, and I work for the Department of the Army. I'm Deputy Director of my organization.
And what kind of things do you do in your field?
I specialize in foreign military sales, which is, we sell the things that TACOM, which is the organization that I specifically work for. So the tanks, weapons, those types of things to our foreign partners.
With the guidance of Mr. Harris, we could see the layout of defense contracts, how they are composed, and what they are made up of. The first question we could find ourselves asking is, how did these contracts come to be? This will be answered by understanding just exactly what kind of things defense contracts include. So, what exactly is a defense contract and what's included inside of it?
A defense contract is basically a legal agreement between, the United States government and an agency, if you will, different type of business, private company to provides goods and services based off of whatever the specific need is that the government is looking for. So that can be, weapons, like things that I sell, can be services. When you look at FEMA, those types of things, different efforts, technology. The gamut is pretty wide on, what kind of contracts defense contracts do, and they all have like a specific, starting in. They all have like a specific reason that the government is going on contract with them, going into an agreement with them.
An excellent example of a contract to look at that really displays the complexity and specifics that are required to produce a high-quality contract is the F-15 contract. The F-15 entered service with the United States Air Force in 1974 as a result of McDonnell Douglas being awarded the contract winner of the FX fighter program. The FX fighter program is a very good example to show how the United States military does not produce its own equipment. The United States military works with companies such as Lockheed Martin, McDonnell Douglas, Northrop Grumman, and more to produce its military equipment. The FX fighter program was a competition between military contractors to produce the new premier fighter of the United States Air Force. The original contract was broken up into multiple items or sections. Item 1 included the design of the aircraft, the development of the aircraft, being the airframe, and engineering. Item 2 being testing and production of the aircraft. Testing aircraft would total 20 units, and production aircraft would tally up to 107. In the original contract, the logistics to support it were a key aspect of this item. The contract had thousands of pages that were all needed to accurately cover all of the requirements in order to produce the F-15. These are just some of the basic things that the original contract between McDonnell Douglas and the USAF had to touch on in order for the F-15 to be produced. Some other things that were needed to be included were unit costs. As stated previously, The United States military works with companies to produce their equipment, so the price for an individual unit needs to be specified and included in the contract. This detail is important because every branch of the military has its own annual budget. With things having an individual unit cost, it makes it easy to calculate how many funds you can allocate to a particular capability. One thing shared with me in my conversation with Mr. Harris was him saying, quote, "We don't sell weapons, we sell capabilities." Connecting back to how the contract will not just cover the product itself, but everything needed to support it. However, it doesn't end there. The F-15 would eventually end up needing a lot more contracts to support it. Some reasons being that over time the F-15 got upgraded, some examples being the F-15C, D, E, and EX, and many more smaller upgrades included between these. More reasons for the F-15 needing more contracts would be included in the fact that the F-15 has been sold to other nations being Saudi Arabia, Japan, South Korea, Israel, Singapore, and Qatar. These nations need their own unique production contracts for the F-15 due to the fact that the F-15s are being produced for them and not sold to them from already existing inventory of the United States. More reasons for new contracts being needed would include the fact that the original company that produced the F-15, McDonnell Douglas, was purchased by Boeing. Another reason that more production contracts would be needed can connect to the fact that the original production contract only called for 107 units. Currently, the United States Air Force operates over 400 F-15 fighters. As previously mentioned, the Eagle has received numerous updates since it first entered service with the Air Force. These upgrades include their own series of complicated contracts with other companies that might not have even been involved in the original production contract. An example of this can be seen when we look at the engines that were included on the original F-15 model as opposed to the most recent model, the F-15EX. The EX Eagle II includes engines made by General Electric, as opposed to the A variant of the Eagle, which has engines made by Pratt & Whitney. A contract was necessary for the production of the EX version of the Eagle due to the fact that it relies on engines made by the company General Electric, that were then implemented onto Boeing's F-15EX. And since it covers like such a wide topic of things and can often be very specific, how long can any one contract be?
On average, they're usually anywhere between 3 to 5 years. And again, it just kind of depends on what we call the scope or the statement of work, if you will, on, what the service is. So, if we're used to selling something and the government is going to always have it, sometimes we'll have like a contract called an IDIQ. A firm fixed price type of contract to where we know what the cost is going to be, but for 5 years, there's going to be, maybe a different cost, a slight different scale based off of, the type of contract, and it's based off of a quantity. There is, like I said, so typically they're 3 to 5 years, but if it's a service contract, it could just be a year. And it really, really depends on what the service or what the material the government needs for that specific time.
Right. And what would happen if a nation or contractor doesn't really pull what they're supposed to be doing in the contract?
So, I mean, the obvious first would be to terminate the contract, right? They didn't uphold, the agreement. And, if they didn't, they would be liable. They could be liable depending on, how far the contract has been out. They could be reliable up to all the funds that, the government has given them. They would be reliable many times for maybe the material that they used to build out, whatever the government had them to do, and any types of reimbursement. And I think probably what I see a lot of times with contractors, they get on the naughty list. They get on the bad list. So, if they don't perform, they're going to get on a list, and chances are they won't get the next bid.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So why exactly is it that we need defense contracts? What's their importance?
I mean, there's so a defense contract. So obviously that's for our national defense strategy, and to protect. So first of all, safety, um, and 9 times out of 10 is supposed to be in the interest of our national defense strategy that the president puts together and his cabinet puts together yearly. But for technology, leveraging technology, leveraging the partners, the private sector for technology. There's very smart people in the government, but there's also significant amount of smart people. You look at outside of the government, so you look at a lot of the technological advances that we've made. The government has invested into the private sector via a contract for them to do the market, the research and development of products and all that. Another thing is stimulates our economy. In the government, make we don't make money. It's not a for profit. So it's just like any other 501c3 type of government or non-for-profit organization. The government itself is a non-for-profit, and so we're not in the business of making money, but we do, in theory, want our companies to make money. So that's kind of going to that capitalistic, kind of society. But we want our companies to thrive because then that stimulates jobs and so on and so forth. And then another thing is like it frees up civilians, the folks that are, needing to do other things. It frees up, personnel so that they don't have to actually do some of that work that, the contractors would do.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome, everybody.
And how have you seen these contracts change in recent years?
Well, since we've gone into Ukraine, no, we haven't gone, but what, our investment, I would say, into Ukraine has really increased. A lot of contracts, and with the volatility in the world, we'll see an uptick in different types of spending, and a significant amount of that equipment that we've sent over there's going to need to be sustained. So not only that in the conflicts that we find ourselves either in or supporting. Technology, we need to stay competitive in this market. When you think about Russia, China, these other global powers, we need to stay valid and relevant. So technology, especially when you're dealing with cybersecurity, is very, very significant. So that's the writings on the wall that the money's going to need to be spent to keep us the center of excellence, if you will.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And how do you see these contracts changing in the future with times to come?
I'm not in that specific into contracting, so I can't really speak to that. All I can say is that there probably will start seeing more increase. We might see more speed. There's a lot of regulations that go into, having a contract in place. So what we might see is, more speed, to get contracts. They might, change some policies potentially. And this is just me theoretically thinking on how we can stay more competitive in this environment. The government is the government. And so there's a lot of red tape, but there's a lot of policy, there's a lot of regulations just to get a contract in place. And then there's a lot of follow-up in between the beginning and the end. So potentially maybe waiving some of those policies, waiving some of those red tape to speed things up potentially.